Right, assuming I'm facing the right way. Nothing can prepare you for coming face to face with the old man of Hoy. 450 feet of storm-hewn sandstone sticking straight up out of the Atlantic off the Orkney Islands. It's a natural skyscraper, roughly the shape and size of the Gherkin. It's Europe's tallest sea stack and Britain's most awesome pinnacle. For 30 years I've dreamed of conquering this giant, ever since watching a documentary about legendary mountaineer Chris Bonington and his epic ascent. It's why I started climbing. But aged 19, with the sky seemingly the limit, I discovered I was going blind, and my life went into freefall. Climbing's all about trust. If I couldn't trust my sight, how could I expect others to trust my judgment? I'd hung up my harness and started a 2-decade battle with my cravings. Now, on Midsummer's Day 2013, I'm standing at the foot of the old man, about to become the first blind man to attempt the climb. What little sight I've got left is like peering through a keyhole into a smoke-filled room. I catch glimpses of parts of things. If they're brightly coloured and stay still, I might even recognise them. The old man of Hoy and its red Orcadian sandstone is the colour of dried blood, and about as unlikely to move. So I take it in stages, a lot of stages. Martin Moran, who's leading the climb, sets off first. The protection, the metal wedges, he'll insert at intervals into the rock to cheat death should he fall, jangling at his harness like wind chimes. I track their progress, trying to visualise the line that he's taking. After 20 minutes they stop, and I feel 3 tugs on my rope. It's the signal that he's ready for me to follow. My fingers explore the rock, testing its decaying strength, and I settle on 2 firm holds. I grimace at Keith the cameraman and climb to the first ledge. Only another 444 feet to go, and the coffin, and all of it being recorded for TV and radio. But the story the media came to tell is not the whole story. Ironically, the parts that they left out is what make this the story worth telling. A 9th birthday party, a chance remark, a burgeoning bromance, and the London Paralympics are the signposts on my journey from self-destructive former climber to, well, standing here. So, I'm facing the wrong way. 2 decades of, since being diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, I'd spent 2 decades of losing my eyesight, and I'd lost 95% of it, and had to give up all the sports that make me feel truly alive. Writer and climber Al Alvarez calls it feeding the rat, a gnawing compulsion in some of us that can only be satisfied by pushing ourselves to the limits of endurance. Starved of action, my rat was eating me up. I ached to climb, and Pilates was no substitute. I tried a couple of indoor climbing walls during the 1990s, but low-level bouldering didn't feed my need to get high at the end of a rope. So I wasn't expecting much when in 2009 I turned up to my local wall at London's Swiss Cottage for my daughter's 9th birthday party. How wrong could I have been? While the other parents were ogling the buff body instructors, I was checking out the bumps and curves on 18 purpose-built, top-roped high walls, and I was smitten. If my instructor, Trevor, was surprised by my blindness, he never let on. Rather, he made me feel like I was helping him become a better teacher by giving him a different perspective to work from. So, week by week, my confidence returned, and the prospect of getting back out onto real rock became less absurd. And then, one day, as I lay gasping but exultant at having cracked a tricky, overhanging problem, and Trevor was waxing lyrical about his favourite mountainside, I let slip my dream about the old man of Hoy. Trevor rubbed his chin, and in his calm, considered way said, well, with a bit of work, I could probably manage it. For the next 2 years, it was enough to know that my dream wasn't completely untenable, and my steady progress was a happy counterpoint to my rapidly degenerating eyesight. No one expected me to act on my dream, but then no one had anticipated the intervention of Matthew. A sinewy blend of northwest London chutzpah and Yorkshire forthrightness. Matthew was one of the few other dads doing the school run. Like our kids, we got on okay without knowing each other that well, but I knew enough that as soon as I mentioned climbing, I was kicking myself. Of course he wanted to join in, but I wasn't ready to share. Besides, he was notoriously fit. The school gate mums fluttered around as soon as he arrived on his single-speed bike. What physical self-confidence I'd slowly built up was going to be blown out of the water if this novice came along and outperformed me on his first or second go. And as it was, it took barely 70 minutes. By our second session, he was climbing a grade above me. And for the first time, I left the wall feeling utterly dejected. It didn't help that this coincided with my hitting writer's block on a sequel to the novel I'd published the year before. My attempts to regenerate some sense of independence seemed doomed to falter in the foothills whilst others strode to the summit. So that night, I seriously considered climbing on a day Matthew couldn't. I was feeling very sorry for myself. Instead, I discovered that his indomitability was both inclusive and infectious, and soon our increasingly friendly rivalry had attracted the attention of a new instructor, a Colombian PhD student called Andres, who, like Matthew, viewed my blindness not as a barrier, just a hurdle. So, with two indomitable problem solvers on my case, resistance was futile. Armed with blindfolds and clipboards, they set about streamlining my technique. And at any other time, I might have balked at this interference, but this was London 2012, and the Paralympics had come to town. Day after day, the media was giving extensive and positive coverage to disabled people, inviting the public to look beyond the disability and focus on the individual. Competitors were encouraged to tell their story, and did with pride and humility, and thanks to those who'd recognised their potential. And it began to dawn on me that mountains don't get conquered single-handed. If I wanted to climb higher, I was going to need to have to accept the help on offer. I was also going to need to learn to accept criticism, which isn't easy when your physical impairment leaves you naturally defensive. Undaunted, my two brave companions set about their task. So the only way to tackle a big climbing problem is to break it down into manageable sections, or pitches. Each pitch then becomes a series of moves, the hardest of which is known as the crux. Crack the crux and you'll win the pitch, and each pitch takes you closer to the summit. The crux of my problem was the amount of energy I wasted between moves. With Andres now acting as my eyes, we needed an efficient way for him to communicate the whereabouts of my next hand or foothold. So we spent months perfecting a clock face system. And doing this as a team was fun and dispelled the frustration that we all felt. And it soon spilled over into strategy meetings at the pub. At one of these, Matthew and Andres announced that we needed a target. So I told them what Trevor had said about the old man of Hoy, and my dream became a project. Now, clearly, we needed professional help. So our little team expanded. First, high sports guru Cole Styron devised this brutal climbing fitness regime that saw me lose 12 kilos and gain the ability to hang from one arm like a chimp. Next, we needed to hire some local guides to organise logistics and to lead the climb. And with a dozen previous ascents between them, Martin Moran and his fellow mountaineer Nick Carter were the obvious choice. But before they come on board, I needed to convince them that I was up to the task. So I joined them for 3 grueling days climbing in the Highlands. Now, meanwhile, the story of the blind man looking to conquer the old man was attracting attention, especially after it was featured on BBC Radio 4. Donations were flooding into the Just Giving page that we'd set up to fund research into retinal disease. And the messages of support, particularly those from other blind people and from the climbing community, kept me going when self-doubt nagged. So when the man who had first inspired me, Sir Chris Bonington, sent his best wishes, it was like getting a blessing from rock God. Then, with just 1 week to go, a TV production company got in touch, saying they wanted to film the attempt for the BBC. And so Keith Partridge, one of the world's top adventure cameramen, joined our team. My small story had just got a whole load bigger. But as I was discovering, this also meant that I was no longer its sole author. In order to concentrate on my safety, Martin Moran had decided that he, Nick, and I had to climb separately to Matthew and Andres, which kind of scuppered our plan of a triumphant summit altogether. And then worse was to come when Keith gently informed me that 3 characters was also enough for the documentary, making any mention of the vital role played by Matthew and Andres irrelevant. Feeling a bit like the singer ordered to ditch his bandmates and record recession musicians, I tried not to think of Matthew and Andres sitting on the cliff top, watching me prepare to tackle the first pitch via camera. I had to flush these thoughts from my head because climbing demands total commitment. If your mind is elsewhere, you'll fall. It's why I love it. At its most intense, I actually forget that I'm blind. So I grimaced at Keith and started to climb. 200 feet up, the crux gaped overhead. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. It's a bottomless, 3-sided chimney running deep into the rock and topped by the old man's monstrous overhanging belly. It's so difficult to climb out of, it's known as the coffin. If I fell here, it was over. I'd end up suspended in midair, held at the end of Martin's rope, but unable to regain the rock face. Nick was standing by, acting as my eyes, and filming everything in close-up. Now, I used to joke that being blind was an asset in climbing. In my mind, I was only ever a few feet off the ground. But bridging that bottomless chimney, with nothing but birds between me and the sea, I was under no illusions about the drop. I inched out under the overhang, groping for a hold on the weather-worn rock, its bulge forcing me out over the void and sapping my strength by the second. 200 feet below, the waves slow clapped like they were waiting for me to fall. As I felt my foot began to slip, my despairing fingers closed on a crevice, and at full stretch now I jammed my hand into it and, summoning everything in me, levered myself out and over and up. I'd done it. I cracked the crux, and after 5 hours climbing, I stood at the summit, elation mingling with a strange sense of reconciliation. My blindness had brought me here. Without it, these chapters of my life would never have been written. Now, I should have known that the clamour coming from my companions on the cliff top contained more than mere praise. This story was bound to come with a twist, but their words were snatched away by the wind, and I only learnt their significance later, after 3 abseils and a weary slog back up the cliff. Nick's camera had malfunctioned. With no close-up footage, there could be no documentary, unless I do it all again the next day. To add a touch of jeopardy, it poured with rain overnight, lining the coffin with slimy, wet sand. If my first ascent had been about making history, my second was about taking the money shot. 9 out of 10 climbing accidents occurred during the descent, and whilst I made it back down to London okay, I fell quickly into a rut. Matthew and Andres had shrugged off their disappointment, climbed the old man magnificently, and were already planning our next expedition. But I still felt guilty. A rut is merely an endless coffin, unless you climb out. And my companions had shown me the way. Focus on what you can achieve, rather than seeing only what might have been. If I didn't like the way events had been portrayed, I could do something about it. I started to write. And as I retraced our route, I found a more vibrant story than any I'd ever tried to bend into a second novel. There was a reluctant protagonist, loyal companions, a call to action, a journey peppered with incident, mountains to climb, and a giant to defeat. There was even a false ending. And, like all the best stories, it held a revelation in its final chapter. Of course, all good stories should also have a moral. So whilst I hope mine has entertained you, and that I get to live happily ever after, I will add a cautionary note. Storytelling is common to all cultures across all eras. It's how we pass on knowledge, express our dreams and nightmares, and give context to our existence. It's an oral tradition. Our video age focuses attention on a story's visual impact. But just think what you might be missing if you don't look beyond the limits of what your eyes can see.